Happy April 1st to everybody. It's good to see you here. Today I'm going to talk a lot about seaming, and I'm trying some new things with my live stream and learning more about it. So I'm going to actually be inserting some pictures of seaming so we can look at them up close and talk about them instead of me going like this and showing them to you, okay? Excuse me. How are you all doing? I'm well, thank you. My family's well, and we've started doing indoor exercising and stuff like that. It's really kind of fun. So let's see who's on here. Amber, hello Amber. Diana Danko, Elizabeth Nielsen, Francoise, Amber, all my favorite people, Renee, Betsy, Nancy Porter, Diane Eddy, Susan Day, Fatima, Lena, Diana Danko, and Emily Beaton so far. So, this is a good one today. I put a lot of work and effort into this, and I hope that it helps you. I'm going to go through a series of common seaming scenarios. I have videos on every single one of these that I will link down in the description later on. And by the way, my name is Suzanne Bryan. If you've never watched my live streams before, you're new. I'm Suzanne Bryan, and I like to teach knitting. I like to teach the nitty-gritty about knitting, how to make it look better. So we've got Marlene, hello, and Maureen, Claudia, and T. Haberkin, Catherine, Joan, and Rebecca. So I'm going to start right out by showing you how to seam stockinette stitch. So this is the right side of a stockinette stitch swatch. Now, when I run, can you see the little hand that's going up the center of the seam? Can you see that? I don't know if you see that. Do you see that? Let me know. I'm running a little hand. I don't think I can point over the top of it. Let me see if I can try with the overlay. Widget overlay. Okay, so can you see that? Let's see. Echo. Now, is there an echo now? No hand. Echo or no echo? Oh, I love Alan Dart. David Hensley says, I just sewed up a pair of angel wings from the Alan Dart Nativity collection. I love his stuff. It's so awesome. Is there still an echo? Are you still getting an echo? Echo, is there an echo? I've got to figure out how to avoid the echo thing. Okay, no echo. Okay, so right up through the very center of this swatch is the seam. And you can't really see it, can you? Because it's well done. And I have a video that teaches you exactly how to do the seam. Also notice down across the bottom that, let's see if I can point. Nope. Let's see, on the bottom right here, this is where the seam starts. That across here it's pretty even, and up at the top the same. Up here it's pretty even across the top. So I show you how to do that in the video. And I need to learn how to make a hand on here, don't I? But anyway, you can see this looks lovely. It's a lovely seam. So let's look at the other side of this same swatch. This is the other side. And you can see I used a full column of stitches from each half of the swatch to make the seam. So then you get this raised up area down the back of the seam. And it looks big and bulky there, but it's really not. This is an itty bitty swatch, and so it takes up a lot of the swatch. Let's look at the next one. This is reverse stockinette, seamed properly. And all of these, I did the seam. Let's go back to the first one. You can see the green yarn sticking out below it and above it. That's what the seam is worked in the green yarn. You can see on this side the green yarn at the top and bottom. So the seam is done with colored yarn, and you can't see the yarn once the seam is complete. So that's how you know it's a good seam. In this one, you can see a little bit of the echo again. Why is it doing that? Okay, I'm so sorry. Why is it doing that? Hold on. Mic, built-in microphone. That's what I have chosen. Get rid of that. Okay. I'm sorry. So this is reverse stockinette, and there are times when on the right side of the fabric you want to have reverse stockinette rather than stockinette. And so this is reverse stockinette seamed. Oh, I see. I'm getting it. I'm learning new things about this software. So let me go back here and here and here. Okay, we're good. Okay, so this is the reverse stockinette. You can see a little bit of the blue. This is the blue yarn coming out at the top, but you can see a little bit of it peeking through on the reverse stockinette stitch swatch. Now let's look at seed stitch. Seed stitch is harder to do. Here's the seed stitch swatch. And what you're looking for in seed stitch, the seam goes right up the center, is you want to maintain the architecture of the seed stitch across the seam. So you can see the diagonal lines that those bumps make continue across the seam. So seed stitch is seamed a little bit differently than stockinette stitch. And again, I have videos on every single one of these in fine detail, including how to start with the down here at the bottom. Let's see, get my finger over there. At the very bottom, you start with a figure 8 right here. That's what keeps the bottom nice. And up at the top, you end up here. Whoops. Over here, it's mirror image in there with a figure 8. And that's what keeps the fabric without a jog across where the seam is. Okay, so let's look at the other side of this seed stitch swatch. On this one, I used a full column of stitches to do the seam. So on the other side, you can see that full column of stitches, and you can see my blue yarn there that I used to seam it. Now, you can also do seed stitch by seaming a half a column of stitches rather than a whole column. And the right side looks like this, where you can see the yarn that I seamed with. But if you were using the off-white yarn, that would be an invisible seam. But I'm actually seaming into the very edge stitches. So half a stitch in from the edge, and the wrong side of it looks like this. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? That makes a very, very flat seam. The wrong side almost looks better than the right side, but if you were using the same color of yarn instead of the green, the right side would look very good too. Okay, let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, sometimes this is about picking up stitches. And I have two of these, this one and this one. Let's talk about the pink one first. On the pink one, the first few stitches across the bottom there at the center of this is like a neckline, the center front, is where the stitches have been bound off, and then you knit over and come back, bind off a couple stitches. And then you can see up where the diagonal part is, what I did there is this is called full fashioned. So those decreases that are right there on the diagonal portion, those decreases are worked as, in this case, knit two together. They're worked toward the seam edge. And then I did the neckline, and I used a tubular bind off on this particular one. You can see how nice that looks. But you can also see that the neck doesn't flare. Now I have all these samples down here in front of me, and after we finish looking at the pictures, I'm going to get the samples out and look at them again and handle them and show you some fine points about each one, but I can also bring the picture back up, okay? The next one is the blue one. It's done exactly the same, but in the diagonal area I used SSKs. And so this is called blended. Okay, so when you use this method, it's called blended. Now, why would you want to choose one over the other? If you're doing standard stockinette stitch or a plain fabric like stockinette, I think this one actually looks nicer. It makes a nice line around the neck and it looks very, very tidy. But let's say that you're doing a Fair Isle. You wouldn't want that line on the edge there, because let's say that that line might not be the color choice that you would have chosen for that particular square in order to maintain, or that stitch, to maintain your stitch pattern, correct? If you're having a little design of Fair Isle going or stranded knitting, or even if you're doing mosaic knitting or anything like that, you don't want the decreases to actually bring over a different color into the wrong area, the wrong color into the correct area, because then it becomes very noticeable and it becomes a line in your knitting of a different color. It's the colors in the wrong place. In that case, that's when you use full fashioned. So you can see the design goes right up to the edge of the picked up stitches. There's no line there. So you would use this particular type of decreases if you were doing stranded knitting, Fair Isle, mosaic knitting, or any other type of color work. Let's see what else we have here. Oh, sometimes you have to, before it was all stitches to stitches, right? Oh, I didn't bring any swatches of rows to rows, but I have some here. Okay, I didn't photograph them. This is seaming stitches to rows. Now notice that neither piece of fabric is distorted to meet the other. This is not like you have to ease in one fabric to the other like if you're sewing on a sewing machine. Instead, what you have to do is figure out the piece where you're going to be using the rows. You have to figure out your row gauge. And the piece where you're going to be seaming stitches, you have to figure out your stitch gauge. Hold on. So in this is stockinette on these two pieces of stockinette, and it's worsted weight, and I worked it with a US 7 needle, and I was getting 5 stitches and 7 rows to the inch. So on the swatch there, that is the tall skinny one, that's the one you're going to take your row gauge, and I was getting 7 rows to the inch. The short side swatch there to the left side is where I'm going to be using stitches, and on that swatch I'm getting 5 stitches to the inch. So what I'm going to want to do is merge 5 stitches into 7 rows. And how would you do that? Let me get my whiteboard, okay? Okay. On this side here is the rows. And I'm getting 7 rows to the inch. So I'm showing 14 rows there. There's the inch, okay? So we have over on this side, we have 7 rows, and we want to attach 5 stitches. So we're going to attach a stitch to the first row, a stitch to the second row, then we're going to skip a row. And then we're going to attach, 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 skip a row, attach, attach, skip a row, attach, 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 skip a row. So that will give us the ratio of 5 to 7. And you can see that it works out perfectly on this swatch, that neither piece is distorted. So whatever your gauge is, you've got to figure it out. It won't be 5 and 7. Everybody's will be different. That just happened to be mine. Now here's another swatch. This isn't stitches to rows. This is rows to rows. But I'm showing 2 fabrics that have a different row gauge. The swatch on the right side is going to have, it's also worsted weight on a US 7 needle. It's going to have 7 rows to the inch. The garter stitch, I think I'm getting, let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm getting 10 rows to the inch. And 2 rows make 1 garter ridge. So I'm getting 5 garter ridges. Isn't that interesting? I'm getting 5 garter ridges to 7 rows. So you would use the same kind of ratio. So you would be seaming every other row on the garter ridges to a row on this side. So the right side. So it would look like this. Again, it would look just like this, only these over here, oops, everything's mirrored. These would be garter ridges, not rows. So you're going to attach a garter ridge to a row, another garter ridge to a row, skip a row, garter ridge to a row, etc., all the way up. And then you can see that they match perfectly, right? Okay, so that's all of the pictures that I'm going to show. Let's just go back to me. Now let's work our way through these swatches where I can move them around and handle them. And if you need to see that picture again, to see it up close, I'll show you. So when you're doing, let's look at this one because it just came up. It's on the top of my pile. Let's say you're picking up stitches around this edge. Now you can see if we look on the wrong side, we can see these are bound off stitches right here, and then there's a little jog, and then some more bound off stitches, and then we go into bind off two, and then these are the decreases along here. If you do this correctly, you get a nice curved edge. See on this side, you see the bind off, right? And it's jagged. Do you see that? It goes over here, goes over here. There's some bind off two, and then we have the individual decreases here. In this case, they're SSKs. So, but it doesn't look so smooth there, but on this side, look how smooth it is. Makes that absolutely perfect curve around the neck. Also notice there are no holes. Have you ever picked up stitches around a neck? I'm pulling on it. And had holes? There are no holes. I'm stretching the fabric out. There are no holes. The reason is, as you're picking up stitches along here, when you go to do that jump for the next, it's easier to see on the wrong side. So you've got these stitches here, you're picking up straight across, and then there's that jog. Don't pick up in the jog. Don't pick up in the side of the jog. Okay? You just skip straight up to the top of the next bound off stitches and work across. you'll think, oh my God, there's going to be a hole there because I skipped it. But no, if you go into the jog, yes, you will have a hole. But if you go up, skip it, and you're picking up through the tops of these bound off stitches, right through the tops of them. I need to perfect this so you can see it better. But you're literally picking up just in the tops of the stitches. Do you see that? Each top of the stitch has another stitch coming out of it. That's how you avoid the holes. If you try to pick up in the stair step itself, it will make a big hole on the front of your work. Ask me how I know. I have some sweaters that have had holes in them before I knew how to do this. Then when you get up here into the diagonal, you're picking up in the row gauge, you're picking up stitches for rows all the way up to here. So you treat the stair step area as if you're picking up stitches from stitches. And then you jump up, pick up stitches from stitches, and you keep jumping up, picking up stitches from stitches until you get to the diagonal. Once you hit the diagonal, then you convert back to your ratio between how many stitches and rows you have. Now, of course, I knitted a swatch of my neckline first, of this knit one, purl one ribbing, so that I could get my stitch gauge from it. You need to know your gauge of the ribbing, what it's going to be, and then you need to know the row gauge of your fabric of your garment. So here I'm picking up, again, 5 stitches for every 7 rows all the way up. On the diagonal, and the vertical. On the horizontal, you pick up stitches for stitches, diagonal stitches for rows, vertical stitches for rows. And if you follow that, your neckline will come out absolutely perfect. See, it does not pucker forward, it's not pulling in. The neck is perfect. Armholes, the same thing. Anytime you're going around a curved edge, if you use this technique, it will come out absolutely, it just lays perfect. It lay perfect around your neck. See that? And another thing, and it's all personal preference, but I don't go down a needle size when I do ribbing because I do a gauge swatch, and I also use that method of tidy ribbing where I keep when you have the transition between the knit and the purls, I make sure that it's really tight so that I don't get those enlarged knits before the purls, because that's what makes ribbing look sloppy. And once you figure that out, you don't ever have to go down a needle size again for your ribbing, because your ribbing will come out just lovely. So this had the same needle for the whole project. And all my sweaters, I don't use a different size needle for different parts unless I'm intentionally trying to change the gauge of an area. So let's look at this one too. See, it's the same thing, but this one has the knit two together. So I get so you can see them. There you can see them. Those are knit two togethers instead of SSKs. So it makes a difference in how the neck looks. So let me go through and see if we have any questions here so far. And see if I've totally confused you. I'm looking for questions. If you have a question, remember, put the word question in all caps so I can find it. And Amber Shiwi says, including her 81-year-old mother is doing good. Thank goodness. I hate that echoing stuff. Every time I go on, I spent like 10 minutes checking out, make sure that I wasn't going to have an echo today. And guess what? I have an echo. Not seeing any questions yet. I've totally confused you, or either I've been very good at explaining and it was perfect. I doubt that. No hand, good sound, no echo. Nice. I'm sorry, I'm just reading through all this. Hello, Claudio Bueno from Berlin. Hello. And Kathy Trykowska. Hello. The echo, did the echo ever go away? Or are we still getting? It sounds like that's a Diana, the swatches that I'm showing you are the swatches from my level 2 in the Master Hand Knitting program. And I knitted those a long time ago. My knitting is much better now than it was then, but they'll suffice to show you the different seaming techniques. Kathy Bruno, question, part 2. Do I calculate different gauges for the various parts of the sleeve to seam to the moss stitch of the edge of the body? Yeah, that's the best thing to do. Now, there's a way you can cheat. You know how you can get those little itty bitty clips, like hair clips? You can use those for clipping your knitting together, and you can just ease it in like sewing. But I am a real perfectionist, and I really like to do the stitches in the ratio. But if that is too much or overwhelming or it's not working for you, then just put the sides of your pieces together, make sure they're lined up, use those little clippies to clip them up until you can get them seamed, and just ease the fabric in. No one's going to know. I will not tell on you that you didn't do it perfectly. But if it looks good, you're good. And by saying looks good, it looks like these swatches that I'm showing you where you cannot see the seam. Okay. Oh, Kathy has a question, part 1. Oh, I want to seam the sleeve to the body of my sweater. The sleeve has various patterns, moss, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I got that. Question part 3, I could just pin the sleeve to the body and estimate. Yes, exactly. That would be fine either way, as long as it looks good. Dimitri, a question. Doesn't that leave 3 contiguous stitches on the garter that are not attached? Won't that leave a gap? Let's get this out. Here's my swatch that I took the picture of. Here's the garter ridges. Let's look and see if there's a gap. And I used white yarn. I used white yarn to seam it with. I don't see a gap. You see a gap? No gap. Looks fine. Let's look at, I had another one. This one, where we're seaming rows to stitches. Let's see if there's gaps in this. Oh, no gaps. No gaps. Now, the way you can see it, when I used to review for Master Hand Knitting, if you use a different color, you can see all these stitches that are picked up. And see the long one there? That long blue one? That's where a row was skipped. Here's where a row is skipped. Right there. A row skipped there. See where and there's a row skipped there. See where the long ones are? The bigger blue dots? That's where the row is skipped. But it's not going to show on this part of your work. There's not going to be any holes. See, I'm pulling it apart. I'm pulling as hard as I can. There are no holes. Okay? Let's see any more questions. I like making necklines with short rows after all stitches that should have been bound off in increments have been left unworked. I work all the double stitches as one row and then work the bind off. Great. Perfect. Emily, question, why are we still binding off in stair steps? Wouldn't it be tidier and easier to pick up or seam to use short rows? Well, that would be, yes, for a shoulder. Yes, short rows are for a shoulder. But here we're talking about a neckline, the front of the neck. You could do short rows. You could. And it would work out just lovely. That's a good idea. Good idea. Let's see. Claudio said, it's just so nice to see you, almost like walking free outside. Exactly. Do you know what we did today? Oh my goodness. I have knitting friends that we usually get together several times a week, and we haven't seen each other for quite some time. We have been using Zoom, which is really fun. Um, but today we went to an abandoned parking lot with our cars, and we parked quite a distance apart. And several people sat they have SUVs; they can sit in the back of their car. I don't have an SUV, so I took a chair, and we kind of made a circle, but we're way far apart from each other. But we could see each other and talk. We were probably like 10 feet apart from each other, like this circle, like Indians. Is that wrong to say that? I don't know. Anyway, it was fun to actually see people and talk to them. I am getting so lonely. Lonely. Yes, because I'm used to all my friends. Fatima. Comment, your iTag project is complete and will be very important to me in the future. Thanks a lot. My vest will be very simple and I tend to use the saddle instructions for giving a final touch. Cool. Amber, she says, see my comments a little further up from yours. Yeah, that's the short rows. Yep. Good idea. I'm going to try that. Okay. Any more questions? So let me go through some of these other swatches and stretch them out and everything so you can see what they look like. And I also have some alternatives. Now, I wanted to say that seaming is a subset of another term in knitting, and that is joining. Seaming is a subset of joining fabric. So what are some other ways that you can join fabric? How about 3-needle bind off? And you can use 3-needle bind off to join side seams, shoulder seams, and as a decorative edge, you could use it to join sleeves. It would leave you a decorative edge. You could do it so that it's on the inside, but the problem with 3-needle bind off where you have it on to the inside of the fabric, it doesn't look so good on the outside. Notice on these swatches, let's see. Here's an example, but this is in garter stitch. These are 2 swatches of garter stitch you can see across the back here, and they've been joined together, a seam there. You want the stitches to look like it flows across the fabric, so you really don't identify where the seam is. I know you can't see, that's glaring. I don't think I took a picture of this one. So this is the seam right here, and you can see it on the back of the fabric. See there's the seam. It's bulky on the back of the fabric. So if you use 3-needle bind off and you put it to the wrong side of the fabric, yes, it does make a seam, but what it does is it pinches all the stitches together across the seam. You may not have ever noticed that before because if you aren't good at reading your knitting, but to me, it sticks out like a neon light and I don't care for it. So I like all my stitches to look like they're open, not like they're pinched together. In the Master Hand Knitting program, we call that dreaded 11s. We don't want the dreaded 11s across your seam. We want the stitches to be open across the seam. If you use 3-needle bind off and do it on the wrong side of the fabric so that it merges the stitches on the right side of the fabric, you get the dreaded 11s. But you can do a 3-needle bind off on the right side of the fabric and it looks very nice. Here is an example. And I did it in green, but it could have been done in white. So here's the wrong side of the fabric. It's flat. See, there's nothing sticking out. You can see it's flat. And here's the right side of the fabric with a 3-needle bind off. If it were shoulder, it gives a very crisp edge to the shoulder. And if it were in the same color, you would hardly notice it. But in a contrast color, it's really kind of cool. It adds a lot of oomph to your project. You can also use this for a side seam. Here's a 3 needle bind off on the outside of the fabric, on the right side of the fabric, through picking up rows and seaming rows to rows. So this really isn't a seaming technique. It's not seaming, it's joining. Seaming is a subset of joining. So these two pieces of fabric are joined together with 3 needle bind off. And you can see here's the two pieces of fabric with the 3 needle bind off is in between. You could also use I-cord the same way. You can use I-cord to join. In fact, we did that in the pillow tutorial. We used, and I don't think I have any of those samples out. They're put away already. Nope, okay. So I want to show you about ribbing too, right? So here's 1 by 1 ribbing. 1 by 1 ribbing. You can't tell where the seam is, can you? Just looks like ribbing all the way across. It says you see the little blue dots because I seamed it with blue. Here's the wrong side. You can see the seam there. You want to, as in my directions show for the seaming, when I showed you how to pick how you're going to pre-calculate what the stitches should be on the edges of the fabric so that when you do seam it, it comes out, the seam is contiguous across the seam. You don't want the seam to interrupt the design. Here's knit 2, purl 2 ribbing. Knit 2, purl 2. There is a seam in there. You can't see it, can you? There's the seam. Here's the wrong side. So that is what's called finishing. And you do the finishing before you even start knitting. You have to think, on the edges of my piece, how is it going to connect to the other pieces? And how am I going to seam it or join those pieces together? And what will it look like? And you think about that before you even start knitting. Okay, Dimitri has a question. She says, is there something that looks like that 3 needle bind off for joining rows to rows? Yes, you can join rows to rows with 3 needle bind off. It's not hard. What I do is the same thing you have to do. You treat it the same way you would. This is rows to rows. This is 3 needle bind off. And what you do, this is 3 needle bind off on rows to rows, and it's on the right side of the fabric. You have to pick up stitches all the way up one side and down the other. And I do it all on one circular needle. So I pick up very tightly all the stitches here and then turn and go down here. And I have to pick them up in my ratio. And you can see the ratio where I picked them up. You can see it's the 3 to 5 ratio. So you can see the long stitch there where it skipped a row, because you're doing this in stitches off of rows. So you still have to use your ratio, because you can see the seam, the 3 needle join, is the same length as the pieces of the swatches. If you have too many stitches, if you pick up too many stitches, your join will pooch out. I mean, it'll be too big and it'll stretch out your fabric. You want it to be exactly the same length as the fabric. That's why you have to use the ratio. And you can see, get all these ends out of the way, that this is exactly the length of the fabric. You don't want it to distort the fabric. If you don't pick up enough stitches, then it would pull in and your fabric would be puckered along here. Does that make sense? And then this is a really cool method when you do it. It was in the pillow tutorial. So you pick up stitches with a circular needle. You pick up stitches all the way along here in your ratio. Take your needle and then pick with the same yarn, pick up stitches all the way down here, and then you fold it in half, and then you fix your needle so one point is here and one point is here. So the 2 points of your needle are here. You use a third needle and you do the 3 needle bind off all the way to the end here. It's very cool. Very fun to do. And I have seen this done very, very elegantly, actually. You'd have to do more swatching, but you can use a finer yarn. Like this is worsted weight yarn. Let's say I decided I want to do this 3-needle join for the sides of my sweater. First of all, it has a lot of durability, but I want it to be less noticeable, and it's going to be on the right side of the fabric. What I could do is use sport weight yarn or fingering weight yarn, but then I would need to figure out my stitch gauge for the sport weight or fingering weight yarn and pick up an appropriate number of stitches for that stitch gauge. But I could make it very fine, a very fine 3-needle bind off in the same color of yarn, or it could be a contrasting color. It's a very, very elegant knitting, very, very elegant finish. Let's see, any more questions? Dimitri says, okay, I see you need to pick up first. That makes sense. I think it looks just like a crochet slip stitch join. It does. It does. That I invented when I was 12. I just love Dimitri. She thinks a lot like I do. Okay, let's see. Anybody else have any other questions? Let's see. Let's look through my swatches here. Oh, here's my zipper swatch. It has nothing to do with seaming, but there's my zipper swatch. It goes with my video on how to put a zipper in. Let's see what else I have out here. So on the tutorial, I have the last section to finish yet. And that is for picking up the stitches around the front and the different necklines. I have it about half finished, maybe 3/4 finished. Actually, I just need to finish the 2 necklines that are for pullover. And then it will be finished, and then it will go to Francoise to translate to French. Thank you, Francoise. And then it'll be published. So I just have to finish working on the 2, the V-neck for pullover and the crew neck for the pullover. And then it will be done. And the ones I've seen are just really beautiful. Some really, really beautiful work. You should be proud of yourselves. Fatima, question. I am behind due to the difficulty in standardizing intarsia stitches in a vertical line. I don't like to see the misshapen stitches. Is there a secret to solve this imbroglio? Yes. Go to my video that is talks about tidy edge stitches, because the same thing applies to intarsia when you're doing it vertical. What happens is, as you work across a row with your needle, each stitch you go into pulls a little bit of extra yarn from the previous stitch, the row that you're working into, not the new row that you're creating on your needle, but the one you're working into. Every time you go into a stitch, it moves a little bit of yarn with it, with the movement of the needle, till you get to the last stitch. When you get to the last stitch, there's nowhere for that little bit of excess yarn to go, so you end up with a big stitch, not in the last stitch, but the next to the last stitch. And when you're doing intarsia, that is the stitch that you would be joining to the next color. And this can happen on wrong sides and on right sides. Not everyone has that problem. I have that problem. It happens to me only when I'm working my wrong side rows. When I'm working my right side rows, I don't have that problem. So you learn how to compensate for it. And I really don't know why I have the problem. I have studied and studied and studied. I've looked at how I create my stitches, how I move the needles, how I hold my fingers, everything. But it's some minuscule, very, very, very small thing that is happening that accumulates and ends up with a little bit of extra yarn at the end of the row, which makes that slightly larger stitch. And when you have one fabric of one color against another fabric of another color, those enlarged, and it's every other stitch. You'll have a big stitch, little stitch, big stitch, little stitch, big stitch, little stitch. And it's annoying. I understand. So I have that video. It's called Tidy Edge Stitches and Enlarged Last Bind Off. It's the same video, and it explains how to correct that. So that may help you. Okay, Fatima, take a look at that. I'm learning more and more about how to do this live streaming and how to make these videos. I'm actually taking a class every day this week and next week on the software that I use. And there are some really cool things. For example, I would really like to make a video of how to use my YouTube channel and how to find what you want. So once I learn how to do that, I'm going to do it. And then that should help you a lot. And because my video library is huge, and if you don't know what to look for, you won't find it. And YouTube does not make it easy. It's not like I can alphabetize things. They're put in by the date that I created them. And I don't have any way to move them around other than I do make playlists. Like, for example, all these seaming videos, I have a seaming playlist. So if you can find the playlist on seaming, all these videos that I'm talking about will be in that one playlist. But I'd really like to make a video where I can show my computer monitor screen in YouTube what it looks like, not me, but the monitor, and be able to use a pointer and go around and show you how to find things and how to move around in it so you can get more value from it. Okay. I have a mistake on my, this is Diana Danko. Question, I have a mistake on my back. I discussed it on Ravelry. I think I need to use a high contrast for dropping down. Your thoughts? I'd have to look at it. Let me go over and look on Ravelry. Yeah, I remember your yarn. High contrast background, that might be a good idea. Your yarn is very dark. I would put it over, like, see, I use these whiteboards. I love these whiteboards, but you could put your knitting over this so you can see the white through your stitches. It might help you a lot when you're dropping down. And a good overhead light. A really bright light like the, I have a Stella light that I use. I actually have two of them. I have one for the desk and I have one that's a floor lamp, or any of those LED lights that are really bright. Really helps in fixing mistakes. You have to be able to see the stitches. Okay, is there anything else anybody wants to talk about? I hope you're all doing well. In the town that I live in Bakersfield, I've got the hiccups now. Excuse me. Excuse me. In the town I live in, we had 4 positives last week. Now we're up to over 100. We've only had 1 death so far. But we're really practicing distancing here. People are really, yeah, Dimitri says, Diana, you need a magnifying lamp. That helps too. Don't be proud. Get the bright light and the magnifying lamp, or some magnifying glasses out. Deborah Cisneros, yes, isn't it that crazy? With all the technology, you would think we could alphabetize our bookmarked video list. Exactly. On YouTube, it's unbelievable, but they don't allow you to rearrange your videos into some sort of recognizable system. That can be frustrating. So this Saturday, I'm going to do another live interview. The lady's name is Vera Sannon. She's a friend of mine, and she's from Germany, actually. And she does a type of contiguous shoulder design that's very, very nice. And I hope that that's what she's going to talk about. But it will be this coming Saturday at 2 o'clock Pacific time. And let me tell you who else I have lined up for my live streams. I got to work on this. You know, if I feel good one day, I have to get a lot done on that day. So, what's today? The 1st, right? So this week, I'm interviewing Vera. The following week, on the 11th of April, I'm interviewing Sylvia Harding. I don't know if any of you know her, but she does a lot of lace work. She's just a wonderful, wonderful lady. And the following week, I'm going to interview Kyle Kunicki. He lives up in the Seattle area, and he does a lot of color work, stranded knitting, that type of stuff. He's very ingenious, kind of like Sockmatician. He has his own thoughts. He's very good. The week after that, on the 25th, I have set up to interview Lucy Neatby on double knitting, and she has completely different ideas about double knitting than Alistair or Sockmatician, so that should be really fun to get that. We'll all be experts on double knitting by then. And then the week after, I'm going to interview Ilga Leah. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she does a lot of short row work and shawls and lace work. And that's all I have set up. That's through May 2nd. I've got everybody lined up. So also I did contact Tech Knitter. Somebody suggested her, and she's pondering it. I think it may work out because she still wants to stay anonymous. And I said, well, maybe she could put something over her head. So I don't know if that's going to work, but wouldn't that be fun? We could put a bag over her head and cut out for her mouth and her eyes and her nose so she could breathe. So anyway, let's see if anybody else has any other question. Oh, Dee, this is off the topic. You can ask me anything you want. It doesn't have to be on topic, okay? If I don't know the answer, I'll either fake it or say I don't know the answer. She said, how many hours a day do you all knit, and what amount do people devote to become really excellent? I'll speak for myself first, and then other people can chime in. Right now, during this crisis, I'm not knitting very much. But then I have my daughter's family living with me too. So my schedule around my house is completely different than it normally is. And I find that interferes with my knitting. And I can get a row or two. Let me show you. I'm still working on this. Under normal circumstances, this would have been finished a couple of months ago. I've been working on this little section right here, probably for a month. I do like one row a day. I got the whole section finished, then I found a mistake all the way across the bottom, and I ripped this whole section out. That's the first time I've ripped a whole section out. I couldn't drop down and fix each little mistake. It would have taken too long. So I just ripped it out and started over. And I have about one more row to go before I'll be back to where I started the rip out. So that's all the knitting. I've also done a little swatch that is the prelude to my vest. And this is not the design of the vest. I'm just swatching and getting stitch gauge, but I did this cool little thing purely by accident. I made a garter ridge where I was changing in the technique how I was working down here versus up here. Look how the garter ridge turned out with the two colors. I just love that. So and it looks good on the other side too. I'm going to incorporate that into my vest. It just became a design element. Normally, when things aren't like this, I might probably knit for 3 or 4 hours every day. Since I've been retired, I don't knit near as much as I did when I worked. When I worked, I probably knitted every spare minute of every day that I wasn't at work because it was a good stress reliever and I worked in a really high stress job. In fact, I knitted at work on my breaks and stuff like that too. So let's hear about some other people. How much do you knit? Let's see. Tech Knitter could wear a hand knit ski mask. Yes, I was thinking about that. Or even, I don't know if she has any like Mardi Gras mask or a feathered mask, or it could be quite exotic. I think a person could really use their imagination to disguise themselves. Okay, here's a question. Vanny. Question, I have almost finished eye-tag yoke sweater for my 10-year-old son. He has grown from when I had measured him last fall. I don't get too much time for knitting. That's hard. It's hard, especially when you have children, and Thank goodness knitting is portable, and if you work on something small like the scarf that I'm doing, you know, it's small enough I can stick it in a little bag or a purse and carry it around with me and get some stitches in here or there. I understand. And you know, through your life, you'll find there's times when you get a lot of knitting done, and there's times when you don't get hardly any knitting done. And I'm one of those people that when I don't feel good, I lose my creativity. So if you see me not knitting, it means I'm not mentally able to knit. Um, Not that I'm crazy, but just I feel down. So I don't knit. Some people, when they feel down, that's when they knit the most. I'm the opposite. I have to feel good for my creativity to come out. And when I feel good, I go like gangbusters. I mean, I'll probably have 3 or 4 different projects going on and loving every minute of every one of them. Right now, with the coronavirus, my daughter's house being remodeled, her family living here, and it's a lot of changes for me. And it's not that I'm sad or depressed, it's just a lot of changes. So it gives me stressors that I don't normally have, and I find it really hard to knit. Other people might say, well, you need to knit, you'll feel better. Might be true, I don't know. Vanny says, it looks like I need to increase the sweater length. I am not brave enough yet to cut and add length and then kitchen it. I saw that as a solution in a book. Any suggestions? So you're doing the yoked sweater is top down. So all you would have to do, if you finished the hem already, the ribbing at the bottom, is undo it, take out the ribbing. You don't have to cut, just pull it out. It'll come right out. Knit a couple inches longer in stockinette or whatever design you were using, and then add some more ribbing and bind off again. It's really not that bad. You might be able to do it in an evening or two and make it longer. Diana says, I don't knit as much as I would like, maybe an hour a day with a few missed days here and there. Anybody else? How do you knit? And if you have any ideas for other people to be interviewees, I think I'm booked up far enough in advance right now, but I could start accumulating a list of people. And as I said before, I thought it would be really fun to try having Alistair, Lucy, and Nathan all on at the same time talking about double knitting. That would be very fun. Okay, let's see. Fatima says, comment, I really can't understand what you just said. I am very tired at the moment. My knitting stays aside for hours. Exactly. Now, I carry my knitting around with me. It's like I would feel lost without it, but that doesn't mean I'm knitting. But I do have my knitting with me at all times. Even when I go into my bedroom, I take my knitting bag in there. It's always with me. So that does give me some comfort knowing that I have it there. So, anything else? We're doing pretty good. We're coming up on an hour. We'll have to figure out what next week, maybe we'll talk about necklines and stuff, okay? And I can get some samples made up for that. I haven't done any tutorial videos for quite some time now, but again, it's just because I don't feel creative enough. I have tons of ideas. I have tons of things written down that I want to teach about, endless that I'd like to teach about, but the actual act of putting everything together and creating my samples and sitting down and creating the video isn't happening right now. But once I feel less disorganized, I can't really say more organized, but less disorganized, I might be able to get my act together. Okay, so be sure to post your pictures of your work on Ravelry or Facebook, and enjoy the spring weather if you live somewhere where there's spring. And some people are going to start coming into their winter. You can knit year round, you know. In the summertime I do socks, in the wintertime I do sweaters. So we'll see you later. Enjoy yourselves. Happy knitting, and come back and see me on Saturday and again next Wednesday. Take care, and I love you all of you. Bye-bye.